A 36 male, have a long-time friend and a 34-year-old female who I live about 4 blocks from. We've always been very close. I met this friend and her husband in college while they were dating, and I was in a long-distance relationship. I was a groomsman in their wedding, and I'm the godfather of both their boys and was asked to be before both were born. Unfortunately, her husband passed away 3 years ago after a 9-month battle with cancer, during which she was his full-time caretaker. I was always very close with her husband, and since I live close by, I would go over and help as much as I could, be it cooking, cleaning, taking the kids out to do things, yard work and maintenance around the house, especially as he declined and required around-the-clock care. After he passed, I continued to help my friend and her kids, and I spent a lot of time with her kids, now tween boys. Last year I married my wife, who I started dating after my friend's husband passed, so this isn't new. Since then there have been consistent arguments about my performing husband duties for my friend. Some examples of the things she was upset about. My friend called me when she woke up. A piper burst in the ceiling, and she couldn't find a plumber who could come out that day. I'm a contractor, so I was able to call a friend, and he went over as soon as possible, and then I headed over and helped her clean up the mess and helped her with talking to her insurance and hiring a remediation company. After that was done, I helped her demo and replace the drywall. Her car broke down, so I picked up her kids from school and went and played basketball with them while she got it to the shop and grabbed a rental, and then the boys wanted a pizza party, so we grabbed some pizzas and had dinner at the park. She was re-landscaping her backyard and putting in some raised planter beds, and I went over on my day off to help her. My wife is always welcome. She doesn't usually want to go and thinks I should let her figure it out because she's a big girl and she needs to stop acting like I'm her husband. She's even suggested that my friend wants to steal me away from my wife because she needs someone to take care of her. So am I the ID for helping my friend? You are the ID. It's one thing to help a friend when needed, but you seem to have a second family with this woman and her children. The fact that your wife is invited to see the 4 of you being a family and she's the outsider doesn't make it any better. You've shown no acceptance of any type of compromise or any validation whatsoever of your wife's feelings. You simply came here for validation that you're right and she's wrong. That says to me that you value your second family over her. But you don't understand, these are his god kids, they need him, she needs him. Geez, your wife is not a priority to you, and it's sad. You've wasted both her time and yours when it's obvious you'd prefer playing happy family with your friend and her boys. I agree. A part of me thinks that your wife may suspect that perhaps you and your friend would have ended up together if it weren't for her late husband. I suspect it's also because all these favors are getting in the way of her plans with you, and maybe she felt that she had to do something you would have done had it not been for the emergency. Kind of like where he is when I need him. OP says he spends several hours a week with the other family. That time comes from the free time he would normally spend with his live-in wife. He is the substitute husband for the other woman. Eventually the odds are they will have intimacy. Is it guaranteed? No, but they are human. And for some reason, if a disaster hit their town, I fully believe OP would rush toward his friend's house to check on her first, and then tell his wife he had to make sure the boys were okay before he had time to check on her. Honestly, divorce your wife. She's not your priority. You already have a family. I hope you and your late bestie's wife are happy together, and I hope your wife finds a husband who puts her first. Story 2. A 29 female was supposed to pick up my niece Sophie pre-tween from elementary school and spend the day with her. It was all mentioned before to the school, and I've picked her up a few times before. Sophie was running towards me, but unfortunately she tripped and fell down. Her knee was bruised, and she started crying like crazy. I took her to the nurse's office immediately. The nurse was in her early 20s and helped Sophie clean up her wound and dressing. I told my niece a lot about my line of work, so she asked if she was going to need stitches, if so how many and what kind, etc. The nurse was impressed. She showed Sophie a few items of equipment she had and asked if Sophie wanted to be a nurse like her. Sophie said no, she wanted to be a doctor like her aunt Akami. The nurse got a bit upset and asked me why I didn't say anything about this. I was honestly confused. I was like, why would I need to even mention it? I even threw in a compliment saying she was quite good at her job, and I enjoyed witnessing a professional at work. She said I was being too generous with my comments. I told her I was being honest and thanked her for taking care of Sophie's knee. Right when Sophie and I were leaving, she said she'd never been able to guess my line of work correctly because I look better than most of my colleagues. I thanked her again and said I appreciated her help. She said I still owed her for not telling her my job and that it felt like I was testing her or deliberately trying to see how she was doing. I apologized and said that was not what I meant and that I knew she could do her job well. She said maybe I could find a way to make it up to her properly, and I was like, sure, but Sophie and I need to go now. I don't know if I was RDE, but this had me thinking. Should I have told her about my job? She was hitting on you and all you said was thank you. You are absolutely not the ID, but 100% oblivious to her flirting with you. Laugh out loud. Poor Sophie is gonna have to take one for the team and go down again so you can meet the nurse again. Plot twist, that's why Sophie tripped in the first place. I relate so much. 6 years ago, I was hanging out with a colleague outside of work more often. We'd sometimes just hang around talking for an hour or so after work. Or we'd go have dinner together at a nearby restaurant and talk about everything and anything, including our childhoods, our hopes and dreams for the future, how many children we'd like to have, etc. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a bit weird my colleague chose to hang out with me so much. I mean, why me? But I figured they were somewhat new in town and didn't know many people, so they were lonely and my company was better than being alone. I was so shocked the first time he tentatively reached out to hold my hand when we were hanging out at his place eating pizza. So many dots connected in my mind at lightning speed. The possibility of him ever being interested in me had just been so far off my radar. Anyway, we're married now. Anyway, she was definitely flirting with you. This is hilarious. I hope you'll update us, especially if you decide to go out with her. Update, I can certainly see it now. Honestly, this is embarrassing. Well, I am in fact bi-single, and she stands a chance. I'd like to thank everyone for their lovely comments and for making me realize what was happening this whole time. I'll post an update if anything interesting happens. Thanks again. Yesterday I was exhausted. I'm 3 weeks from my due date, but my maternity leave doesn't start for another week. So I came and sat down on the couch and didn't want to get up for any reason. My son Preetween asked me to play with him, but I said I had no energy. He asked if I was hungry, and truthfully I was, so I said yes, but I was too tired to cook. My son offered to make me something to eat. I thanked him and told him to ask my husband to watch him in the kitchen, because he's too young to use kitchen appliances on his own. He came back with my stepson, a young teen, saying that my husband was busy and asked if his stepbrother could supervise him instead. I said okay. My stepson asked if I was sick, and I said I was just run down, but would be okay. They made me some veggies and rice. I'm still determining how much each kid did, and I thought all was well. I felt much better after eating and was able to clean the kitchen. That night my husband asked me why I asked his son to make me something to eat. I said I didn't, he was just watching my son. My husband said my stepson did almost everything for him because he was worried he would get hurt, and my stepson was in the middle of a school assignment when my son interrupted him. I said I didn't know that he was busy. He didn't tell me that. He didn't have to help my son when he asked. My husband said my son told my stepson I was sick, so he stopped his assignments and didn't want to be RDE. I ended up snapping at him that maybe he should have come out to check on me when my son asked him for help. He said that had nothing to do with the situation and my kid isn't your servant. I was so angry and told him to screw off and not talk to me the rest of the weekend. I made pancakes for breakfast. My husband hates pancakes for myself and the boys, but he just made himself an omelet and didn't say anything. The thing is, my stepson must honestly feel wronged. Am I crazy? Was I unreasonable to let my son ask my stepson for help? I feel like I'm in the twilight zone. Not the ID. I can understand why your youngest son said you were sick. He probably thought you being run down and exhausted was you feeling unwell. I'd recommend talking to your stepson, letting him know that you found out he did almost all the cooking, and thank him for helping you when you needed it. Let him know he is appreciated and make sure he's okay. The husband wants this preteen to be able to pick apart the nuances of an adult, saying they are run down from responsibilities versus I am sick due to an illness. It's a child. They see their parents unwell, so all they can assume is that they're sick. The real case occur is that the young son most likely told dad that mom was sick, and dad never once bothered to check on his very pregnant wife until after dinner was made and eaten. Props to the young teen for caring enough about his stepmom that he helped out. The husband is a complete ID that is covered in dingleberries. OP is not the ID and the kids are angels. Well, he's already too busy to check on his potentially ill wife, so why the HCK would he care when the baby's born? OP, your husband is trash. I'm sorry you're about to have that man's child. If your husband, the man who got you pregnant, was so concerned about his teen having his homework interrupted, then your husband could have taken a few minutes to make you a deed omelet. Or something. Because it sounds like he can prepare food for himself. Story 3. My parents had a daughter before me, Summer. She was born and made it only to 5 weeks. I was born 2 years later and her memory was very strong throughout my life. My parents weren't great parents to me because they were still in heavy grief and it made our relationship complicated. I remember they cried on her birthday every year and they also cried on most of mine and she was mentioned at every celebration. I remember wanting to hear more about her for a while, but at some point all the mentions of her were too much, it felt suffocating and I felt less important. When they'd meet new people, Summer was the child they mentioned first and the one they talked most about. Someone would ask what grade I was in or how old I was, and they'd say Summer would be in 4th grade or Summer would have been 13 today. When I graduated high school, I asked my parents not to mention Summer during the celebration. We had dinner with family and a couple of my friends, but not a full-blown party, and they were so angry at me for wanting Summer to be forgotten. I took some time from them in college, but was racked with guilt, and we ended up back in touch. I got married to my husband Kale last year, and now we're expecting a girl. My parents brought up how amazing it would be for us to name our daughter Summer, and my husband was 100% on board. He pretty much agreed before I had a chance to react. When I did talk to him, he was shocked I had any doubts and was ready to go full steam ahead. I told him I wanted our daughter to have her own name, and I didn't want her to carry the weight of Summer, who never got the chance to grow up and was all her grandparents really wanted to talk about. He said he understood, but think of how loved our daughter would feel. And he knows I think Summer is a beautiful name because I do, but the history I told my parents. I wanted my daughter to have her own name, and they cried they didn't really comment. Then they asked if I was going to change my mind. This was a few days after, and I said no. But then my parents and husband were talking and wanted to try and change my mind. They brought a list of pros to me on why our daughter should be Summer, and I told them I disagreed with the list. They argued back and told me Summer deserves to be honored. I said my daughter deserves to live life as herself. Kale said she should still be able to, and the name isn't that uncommon that my sister would be the only person to think of. My parents told me to think of what my sister would want, and how I love my sister and miss her every day. For some reason that BRKE me, I started to cry out of nowhere and told the 3 of them I did not want to name my daughter after a sister I never knew. I don't know what happened directly after I was so upset, but Kayla and my parents think I was cruel to say it like that. Am I the ID? This is all just so messed up on so many levels. OP, you are not the ID, your parents and apparently your husband are. So stand strong and do not put all that messed up baggage on your soon-to-be-born daughter. First, tell your husband in no uncertain terms that he will never bring this mess up again. Never. It's incredibly hurtful to you, and it's a trigger to both you and your parents, and it encourages your parents to go back into their BS. OP is second to Summer mode. Just know, second to shut everyone up. Buy the absolutely cutest pet you can find, dog, cat, other, name the pet Summer and introduce the pet to your parents during the next get-together. That'll shut them up. And we can't name a child after the family pet, right? As to why, because screw your parents and their freaking emotional baggage and BS. Plus, maybe this way, you can build a good association with the name away from your parents' BS. Do this OP, get a pet and name it Summer. Done. And get something with a short lifespan, maybe a hamster, goldfish, or go in the opposite direction and get a macaw or tortoise. Here, Mom and Dad, here's a Summer that will last more than a season, so to speak. In fact, it'll outlive us all. I'll bring it to your funerals. OP needs to see this. Your daughter is not a replacement for the child they lost. Your parents need therapy and should have gotten it long ago. I would be preparing for them to be consumed in your daughter's life in a very unhealthy way and to use guilt to force their will on you. Start setting boundaries now and protect your daughter from living a life in the shadow of a corpse. Her husband is a mega ID. OP, tell him this is a deal breaker. 100%, and he has two options. Get on board with you and understand that there are huge amounts of baggage for this name, or you are out and have the birth without him. So you can make sure he doesn't try to put the name Summer on the birth certificate, because I have a feeling he will. Story 4. I've been part of the same group since secondary school, and now in our early 30s we still meet up regularly. I'm the only one who doesn't drink, and I also have some food restrictions. This means that my meal is always the cheapest option, and I rarely share a plate with the others, even if everyone else is eating. So for years I've always had a separate bill, and then the group evenly splits the remainder. It was suggested by a friend years ago, and nobody has ever made an issue. One friend recently brought her new boyfriend Aaron to the meal to introduce him to the group. We have a tendency to overorder, so I didn't think it was weird that he had a few drinks and ordered more than one dish. When the bill came and my part was separated out, Aaron started getting annoyed and told me to stop being a cheapskate and pay my share like everyone else. I tried to explain, but he just dug his heels in and yelled and called me tight-fisted and selfish. I got flustered and paid my bill and left. Am I the ID for still taking a separate bill even a decade later? Should I not be doing that? Not the ID. Aaron was inappropriately inserting himself into a friend dynamic he knows nothing about. He was being a major ID to someone he barely knows. Don't even bother wasting a thought on jokes like that. It sounds like this happened recently, but you should talk to your friend about it. Expect an apology from the boyfriend if you see his face again. Also, why didn't your longtime friends put him in his place? His girlfriend was trying to get him to be quiet, but he was literally standing up and yelling in the restaurant, so I just paid and walked out. My two closest friends came after me, but honestly, I ignored the group chat for the last day because the whole interaction made me feel awful. This whole blow-up could be his method of isolating your friend from her support group. Honestly, I would proceed as if she were in an abusive relationship. This means you should encourage everyone to let her know they support her no matter what, and that she can always talk to them without telling her that she should leave him or implying he is abusive. Try to invite her to events without him, like girls' night or one-on-one, just to feel her out and share your concerns. His gross overreaction and willingness to create a scene with all her friends have likely embarrassed her greatly. An absurd will do this sort of thing. I know it was hurtful and embarrassing to you. You did nothing wrong, and just reading about it made my heart race. But I'm worried about your friend.